My name is Caitlin Dickerson, and this is my informative speech. These are my audience members: Reagan Walker, A.B. Yarbrough, Anna Garza, Cortland Crutchfield, and Cameronwoman Lindsay Robbins. The final solution, the Third Reich, and the Holocaust are all names given to the horrific genocide or slaughtering of almost 6 million Jews that took place with intent for Nazi Germany to eliminate the Jews from Europe. The purpose of this speech is not only to inform you about the Holocaust, but to inform you about the heinous acts that occurred during it. These acts were included, but were not limited to, the burning of Jews in gas chambers, cruel medical experiments by Nazi doctors, and other terrible forms of tortures that Jews experienced at concentration camps. The Holocaust was the first recorded genocide in history, and it affected the lives of many people, especially Jews, even still in today's society. The events that occurred during the Holocaust were horrific to say the least. Forcing millions of Jews into cattle trains, only for them to arrive at the place where their annihilation was inevitable, was a terrible, terrible thing. I'll speak to you about the gas chambers at Auschwitz, the working and starving to death of Jewish prisoners at the Buchenwald and Belsen concentration camps, and the aberrant medical experiences that occurred at the Dachau camp. To start off, I'll explain how the Nazis used gas chambers to exterminate Jewish prisoners at the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. The Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp was supposedly not built for human slaughtering at first, but the construction of its very elaborate gas chambers declares otherwise, and it turned out to be one of the largest gassing chambers during the Third Reich, or the Holocaust. According to Michael Thad Allen at Georgia Institute of Technology, the sole purpose of construction of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp was to annihilate Jews and anyone else who was against Hitler and Nazi Germany's anti-Semitic movement. Allen researched and reported the Auschwitz-Birkenau complex of 4 massive brick buildings included coal-fire incinerators, tracks to support coal carts, small lorries for corpses, chimneys with underground flues, and in the case of the crematoria 2 and 3, dugout cellars with concrete domes, forced air ventilation systems, and electric elevators. Jewish prisoners entered the camp at Auschwitz and their lives suddenly went up in flames and their dreams turned to dust, literally. Hourly, almost 2,000 prisoners were forced into horrid chambers, showered with Zyklon B pesticide, and were incinerated. The chimneys at Auschwitz were almost always smoking, and the air was constantly filled with the sweet, putrid stench of burning flesh. Next, I will talk to you about how the prisoners at the Buchenwald and Belsen concentration camps were worked and starved to death. The Jewish prisoners, if not immediately beaten to death or incinerated in gassing chambers, were worked to death or starved to death. The Nazis were set out to eliminate all Jews, so they scarcely fed them. The prisoners were only fed if the SS needed them for labor. However, they still met their death from malnourishment, disease, and from being burned. A Wikipedia article states, malnourished and suffering from disease, many were literally worked to death under the Vernichtung durch Arbeit policy, which means extermination through labor, as inmates had only the choice between slave labor or inevitable execution. Although death was pretty much inevitable, many of the Jewish prisoners were worried about their families inside of the concentration camps and chose to stay alive and work themselves to death in hopes that they could somehow help their family members escape. The anti-Semitic movement made it almost impossible for Jews to escape death and imprisonment, so the Jews were doomed to die, whether it was from starvation, being worked to death, or being executed. Finally, I will talk to you about one of the most heinous acts that occurred during the Holocaust. The detestable medical experiments carried out by Nazi doctors were brutal and totally inhumane. The hypothermia experiments at Dachau concentration camps were extremely cruel and often killed a lot of the prisoners. In Dachau, physicians from the German Air Force and from the German Experimental Institution for Aviation conducted high-altitude experiments using low-pressure chambers to determine the maximum altitude from which crews of damaged aircraft could parachute to safety. Scientists there carried out so-called freezing experiments using prisoners to find an effective treatment for hypothermia. They also used prisoners to test various methods of making seawater potable. These medical experiments aimed at facilitating the survival of Axis military personnel. Joseph Mengele was one of the most infamous Nazi physicians. According to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum's website, Mengele had become interested in utilizing twins for medical research through Visscher, famous for experimenting with identical and fraternal twins in order to trace the genetic origins of various diseases. Between the 1930s, twin research was seen as an ideal tool in weighing the variant factors of human heredity and environment. Mengele, with his mentor, had performed a number of legitimate research protocols using twins as test subjects throughout the 1930s. Now at Auschwitz, with full license to maim or kill his subjects, Mengele performed a broad range of agonizing and often lethal experiments with Jewish and Roma gypsy twins, most of them being children. This article also states that Mengele had a weird fascination with the rare disease called heterochromia, which causes the irises of the eye to be two different colors. He often harvested eyeballs from dead prisoners in hopes to figure out how to artificially change someone's eye color. Thus being said, I hope to have informed you all about the overall horribleness of the Holocaust and the events that took place during this genocide. The events that occurred during the Holocaust were horrible, inhumane acts carried out by the Nazi regime, ranging from burning people in gas chambers at Auschwitz, the working and starving to death of Jewish prisoners, and the aberrant medical experience that occurred at Dachau. All these events were cruel acts and crimes committed against innocent human beings. The Holocaust, being the first genocide in history, was only the beginning of a world full of war and prejudice. The world today is full of war, and many people today are still being tortured and murdered just for being who they are. These are still my audience members.